Welcome to Crowning, the show where birthing is your portal to your power. My name is Siobhan Juris, and I'm a full spectrum doula, a childbirth educator, and a spirit baby medium that helps parents and future parents alchemize their fears of childbirth and rise as the leaders your ancestors have been praying for. Today's episode is called Loving on Your Postpartum Friends. And it's been a while since I've come on here. I took a break after the first 8 episodes just to rest. There was so much going on with my life. Launched and premiered the show in the middle of winter. And so, part of this calling to share about birth work, to be a birth worker, is about reacclimating to seasonal cycles versus pushing and pushing no matter what. So when I get a call to change things up, to take a pause, I follow that. And it was super necessary so that I could also hear for the ways that the show wanted to change. I am an animist, meaning I see the spirit in all things, and that includes crowning as its own thing that I've birthed that has its own personality and things that it wants. And so we're here at a new time now. Thursdays at noon is the call this season. We were Wednesdays at 1 before. Maybe that has to do with like a Mercury day to Jupiter day, energetic shift. But I'm here for it. And the format that we're changing a little bit was the first 8 episodes, which are still available on my channel, were really about me being in a practice and modeling, reading information, reading studies. There was kind of like a half answering the topic that came through either intuitively or through the questions on the Spirit Doula hotline, and then half like media literacy and modeling what that looks like to sift through information, to read studies, as we're in a time where people will just say do your own research. And we're not all researchers. We didn't all grow up with that education of how to read things with discernment. Unfortunately, I did. That's been part of my path in life, and that's been part of what I've been called to share here as a spirit doula. So thanks for being here. And I'm really excited because I chose this topic today of loving on your postpartum friends, because I have a friend that is giving birth any day now. One of my friends that I met when we were like 15, maybe 16 years old. We met through the YMCA, and she hired me for her home birth. So shout out to Tammy, who is going to have a home birth any day now. And this video is dedicated to Tammy, dedicated to our girls and our more extended village, because I really wanted to share what I know, so that as friends, as family, as loved ones, we can be informed in how we show up for folks who just gave birth. So this is going to be from the perspective of speaking to the support and the village. This is not going to give a comprehensive um, it's not really getting into everything. If you are somebody that's pregnant and are looking for a video that's going to tell you everything you need to do in postpartum, but you'll also be a village for someone else. And my other intention is that you can slickly send this video to your friends and family so that they can better support you. Also want to mention that I'm sharing today from the perspective and the experience of a Filipino American birth and postpartum doula who's given birth myself. I'm also very influenced by Chinese postpartum traditions, especially because those are the ones that are most ancestrally connected and culturally connected to me personally. But the perspective also that I'm sharing from today is kind of global. And one of the really, really cool, magical things about learning about postpartum, and I'm going to share a lot about this today, is that by learning the traditions of postpartum from the cultures I'm connected to, and then learning more surface level about other cultural traditions, it's pretty amazing how many overlaps there are, which to me just really speaks to um, the truths that are in this ancestral wisdom. From Ayurvedic traditions of South Asia to West African traditions, which are the foundations of midwifery in the US. I'm also in California, where indigenous Mesoamerican traditions are the most influential and also the most available here. And accessible for those, here in the Bay Area, when I have other Filipino or Asian American peers who are looking for postpartum care, there aren't too many of us traditional workers here. And so oftentimes we get to receive from our Mexican and other Central American parteras, doulas, birth keepers, all of the different roles that there are, curanderas as well. And so I would love to hear, either in the chat or in the comments, what overlaps you find in the cultural practices that I shared today, as well as things that I'm not mentioning and things that are specific to your ethnic background, your tradition. But everything that I'm sharing today is with the assumption that if you're watching this video, if you're looking for ways to show up, you may not know a lot about your own cultural traditions. And so everything here is really looking at things that are like principles that anyone can use. Nothing here is a closed practice, and everything is appropriate for you to learn and know and share. We're not going to get into the specifics of even Filipino traditions, because there's a lot that I'm still learning. There's a lot that I've learned since going through my own initiation into becoming a mother. There's things that I learned. And maybe, I'll likely always infuse little stories of my own experience. But there's things that I definitely learned when I had my own child, from my mom, my sister, um, and there's things that I will also touch on that have nothing to do with kind of the cultural like roots. Actually, most of what I'm going to share has nothing to do with that. But I'm also going to touch on things that fit the climate that we're in, here in the US, and the most typical common birthing scenarios. So we're also going to mention how to show up if your friend ends up, their baby ends up in the NICU, if they have to go back to work almost immediately. Those are things that impact all of us here in the US to some degree. People who receive paid long term leave, which isn't even long term in comparison to other countries, but even 3 months of pay is considered really good benefits. 6 months is great benefits. And those are not things that I receive from my employer. I pretty much got like, your job is safe for 6 weeks. And so that's reality for a lot of us. So without before I go any further, let me bring up here our rainbow of readiness. Let's see, where are you? And the rainbow of readiness. Today we're going to be more informational. We're not going to be doing much work in the subconscious, but I like to bring this in whether I'm doing an educational video like this, a spiritual session privately, a group class. This is my framework for ensuring that you're in a place to even receive new information. And so if it's based on the nervous system. If you are feeling really, really shut down and emotionally withdrawn, we're not going to do a lot of somatic practices. So you might want to pause this and go to my channel and do, I have the Soul Spa energy work journey on my channel now. I added that last month, which I'm really proud of because I'm trying to edit more and create more different types of videos. It's not just me talking. Or visit the channel at With Soft Power for a lot of other somatic things to get you where you need to be so you can receive and grow and learn in a way that is harmonious with your system. So, if you're in the 2 to 4, you're welcome to stay regardless. You are sovereign, but this is where optimal functioning and growth can happen. And with that, I actually will start with a little intentional grounding for just a couple minutes. And so, wherever you're at, if you would like to pause with me, I'm going to spray a little of my field shield here to just clear the energy around me and open with a little bit of a intention. And my intention today is to just share this information in the most authentic and helpful way as possible to be part of a culture shift toward more informed birthing, more informed transitions into mothering and parenting, and to be part of this wider movement to reinstill a village culture because that is something that impacts generations and um, the removal of that was intentional, and I always want to acknowledge that the removal is intentional, and the people who still hold these traditions are the ones who are the most under attack, scrutiny, oppression, all of it here in the US. Taking a moment to acknowledge the ancestors of midwifery here in the US, the Afro-Indigenous keepers of birth traditions, as well as those who are indigenous to this land who have who've had their children taken, who've had their traditions banned and exploited, and still today in the modern birth world, in the doula industry, exploiting and extracting from these cultures for profit without honoring those that they came from. So, my sincere intention is to honor every birth tradition worldwide, honor the land, honor each person who carries life and brings life into the world, as well as those who are just life themselves, honoring your growth and taking 3 intentional breaths together as we protect this space for sharing. Thank you. Let's get into it. So, like I said, different from past streams, I don't have, we're not going to pull up articles and read through things. This is probably the most organized version of crowning that I've done so far. And I have a lot of notes, a lot of things to walk through. We'll see how. I mean, I said 30 minutes and it's already 14 minutes in, so that's not happening. But we're in a practice. So um, I think I have like 1 or 2 visuals to share, but gonna be more chatting with you. So get a drink, get some snacks. I've also got some hibiscus tea here that I made yesterday, which you should not drink if you're pregnant. And let's start with the question of what is postpartum. So Postpartum is the period following childbirth. I'll say really quickly that postpartum depression, for some reason, has gotten referred to commonly as just postpartum. Like, I'll hear new parents say, like, "Oh, I had postpartum," and they're referring to postpartum depression, but postpartum is simply the period after childbirth. And today we're talking about it really in the sense of we're going to focus on the first 40 days, which, like I said, is a number that has been consistent globally across traditions for thousands of years. Um, it's pretty incredible. And I am actually myself looking deeper into what it is that has brought this number. I mean, 40 days is kind of like, I think of like biblical and like religious stories that talk about like 40 days in the desert or 40 days of Lent. I grew up Catholic. So then there's like the 40-day period after a death where a soul can still kind of roam. So if you know where that comes from, theories or stories, please do share. But it also medically here in the West usually refers to like the first 6 to 8 weeks of physical healing. You might have also heard about the fourth trimester, and that's a term that was popularized by pediatrician Harvey Karp, who's quite well known in the newborn world. And it was based on this belief, which is rooted in truth. I won't say it's just a belief, that humans used to gestate longer. And when we started walking upright, the baby started being born sooner because of gravity. And that makes our infants, human infants, the most dependent in the primate world compared to other primates. So there is no clear kind of evidence on the exact timeline of what our gestation used to be, but it's kind of believed that it was closer to a year. Now we say 9 months, which 40 weeks, which is what hospitals and medical providers go by, is again that number 40, uh, is not necessarily 9 months, but semantics. But we do see these changes, even around the 3 month mark postpartum. That's usually when people tend to lose their hair, when people experience their babies having changes in their sleep patterns, although they're always kind of changing their sleep patterns. Mood disorders like anxiety and depression might settle in around 3 months. And then there are people who say that postpartum is forever, that you're always postpartum. And that is true too, that there is no, um, there is it's an initiation, it's a complete shift in your DNA, your body physically. And in fact, a lot of these traditions are rooted in the understanding and the evidence that if we don't get our new mothers and gestational parents the rest and the nourishment that they need, this can have long term consequences. There are even different medical conditions that pop up in the menopausal um, period. So a unhealed postpartum can seed things in the body that don't show up for years, if not decades to come. So, all that to say, this is a very sacred time period. And again, cultures across the world agree that 40 days is this gateway, this threshold of care. For Chinese traditions, they call it the sitting month. For Mesoamerican cultures in Spanish, they'll call it la cuarentena, 40 days. So this is consistent, and the principles are consistent as well. So the image I'm going to keep up for us today is really based on that. I'm going to just leave this one for the most part. Um, and let's see here. Oops. I'm going to do that. Yeah. So these are the 5 insights of postpartum. So they are retreat, warmth, support, rest, and ritual. So, when it comes to loving on your postpartum friends, anything you can do to support one of these 5 insights is going to support their vitality for the rest of their life. It's going to reduce, and we're not going to get into studies today. I didn't feel like involving that in the conversation because, again, that 40-day number is just to me like evidence enough. You don't get that in very many areas where there's something so consistent um, across the world that cultures agree to. And so, my personal experience is that I didn't receive these things. I gave birth in the hospital in 2018, and my baby was in the NICU for 6 days, and thankfully, I only lived um, 10 minutes from the hospital where he was at. So I was able to go home and come back. But again, that means like that first one, retreat, um, was off the table because I was not retreating. I was driving back and forth, sleeping in a chair in the hospital next to my baby, and that was not great. Warmth, I did have warm food. That was where I think my main support was my mom cooking for me. But I was back and forth. It was November, and I learned the hard way on the day I was discharged from the hospital about this tradition of warmth and retreat because I remember it was actually in an election day, and we got discharged on a Tuesday. And the first thing that we did was walk to the polls. My husband at the time needed to vote in person, and so we walked to the polls, and I sent a picture of us at the polling place to the family group chat, and one of my family members called me and yelled at me and was like, "What are you doing outside of the house? Why are you just gallivanting?" The favorite word of Filipinos. They're like, "Why are you gallivanting? You need to be home. Your baby was just in the hospital. Like what?" And they were not really kind about it. And I cried because I was like, "Oh my God, like how was I supposed to know? I really had no idea." So that really kind of crushed me. I remember that like really put a damper on my first day. I was so excited to finally bring home my baby. So I guess that brings me to point 3, support. I didn't have that information. They could have delivered that more kindly, knowing that that was something I didn't know, and to them was common sense. But as a mixed race person who is more disconnected and from some aspects of my culture, especially a baby is not something that I had really experienced in my family as an adult yet. So we want to support and receive help from our village, as well as do whatever we can for them to rest. And rest is not necessarily lying down. I think rest includes not scrolling on our phones, not watching things that are violent. In our postpartum, there's a lot of time at home. So, like binging series and movies is very common in the postpartum period. And that's great. Your baby's sleeping half the day. So, do that. And also, what are the things we're consuming beyond food as they can also if we're consuming media that is not supportive to our healing. I wouldn't necessarily go home and watch The Handmaid's Tale, because that is really about violence of reproductive violence. And then ritual, this is where you and your culture or the culture of the person you're supporting really can come in, and we'll talk. We're going to go through each of these later, or they'll keep returning to us. But rituals can include bringing in somebody, a practitioner of the new mother's culture, so that they can receive an intentional ritual. But it can also be a ritual that you create. Maybe lighting a candle and turning down the lights and giving them a foot massage. that's a nice ritual. Maybe it's the ritual of you coming over on a ongoing basis that you agreed to. I was just talking the other day with a doula friend, Gem Birthwork, who is gonna start offering. I think she might already offer these, but she was telling me about these spa days, and I was thinking, oh, that would be amazing for my friend to have on a monthly basis for a doula to come over, do some helo or body work, and maybe pull a card and give them some space to be in a ritual of honoring themselves for that first year. So those are things that I love. Um, I'll pull this away for a little bit and we'll bring it back later. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the hospital, the immediate postpartum. Um, so, everything I'll say later will apply for home birthing, but for those birthing in the hospital, which is the most common place people birth, um, what can you do when they first gave birth? Now, the first thing I'll say is if they tell you they're in the hospital, don't keep checking on them for updates, especially if they're getting induced, especially if they're getting um, Pitocin or epidural. Those births can take a long time. So take whatever updates they'll give you. Don't ask any updates, even if it's well meaning. You will hear from them when they're ready. And when you do receive that first text and update from then, one thing I used to do a lot, I don't do it as much anymore, probably because I'm a doula and show up in different ways. But before, it would be to send flowers to their hospital room. I think that is still something that a lot of people appreciate, that celebration. It's very common for flower shops. There's often flower shops attached to hospitals. So that's one way to show that you're celebrating them. Not the most it's not a cheap way, so, maybe split it with a couple friends if, that feels out of reach, and so, the only thing I'll say about that is, 1, keep in mind, maybe don't send sometimes lilies, I think, have the most pollen. The hospital will know, or not the hospital, the flower shop will know if you're sending. They'll probably have, like, a little bundle to send over there, um but I would say don't send any gifts to the hospital that you would expect them to take home with them after, because they are not going to carry flowers home with them. Even the vases, maybe get the cheapest one. Flowers, I would not say to give to somebody at home. Do not give a new parent in their home anything that they have to take care of. So flowers, especially if they're not in a vase already, unless you're going to be the one to put them in a vase, set them, and then dump them, don't give them anything that's going to add more responsibility. I would keep any gifts after baby arrives. Focus on the mom. Sometimes there's well-meaning things for the baby, but at the hospital, they pretty much have everything that they need for the baby, and they'll go home with everything they need for the baby. And then things like bottles or pacifiers, those are things that are so particular to the individual baby themselves. I always tell people in general, don't ever get too many of the same thing because you don't know what your baby's gonna take to. Um, you also will find out in the first few days, what size they are, and so it might be helpful. Sometimes baby comes early, and that is helpful to buy clothes for the baby because, perhaps if they came preterm or premature, they may not have stocked up on the preemie size or the newborn size of baby clothes. And so that might be helpful to not just buy that, but something that I do for friends, besides going out and purchasing it myself. I have a friend right now who is not on Facebook anymore, but those Facebook buy nothing groups have been so helpful to me. So I got her extra sheets and baby blankets by just going onto one of those groups, picking it up, and bringing it to her. Now, I would have loved to wash them before giving them to her, but my washer broke last week, so I wasn't able to do that. But those are the kind of like thoughtful things. Again, the principle here is like don't do anything that's going to give them more work to do. When it comes to cesareans, they will likely be there for longer than if they had a vaginal birth. So, money to get delivery might be good. Asking them, one thing about asking new parents for things is that I would give them like which sounds better, this or that, instead of what would you like to eat? You can ask that. You know your friends best. But if you know one of their favorite things, I mean, the principles that we want for the food is warm, nourishing. You're going to want something with good fats, good protein, with iron, something nutrient dense. And also, they might have that lined up. So you might be the one to bring them the fun food. Some people, many people, and this is again a very like US centric thing where we have a lot of narratives around not having deli meat and not having sushi. And so I think like majority of people are saying like, "Oh, the first thing I want is sushi. The first thing I want is a good sandwich." So maybe you're the one to bring them that. But also knowing if they're going to be in the hospital a little longer, the hospital will be feeding them, and also you might just want to give them um, that opportunity to eat what they want because emotional good emotions are important too when it comes to nurturing and that satisfaction. Let's see, I'm scrolling down my notes. So they're home now, say that. Coming over, if you're coming over again, I wrote this I wrote this another time here, nothing that will add more work. No flowers, nothing they need to cook themselves unless they ask for groceries. And I also want to mention children. So if you have children yourself, and again, this is really dependent on how your community moves. There are many of us who it's completely normal for children to be wherever they are, just as your friend is going to bring their baby around. You also deserve to bring that. But if you have children, I would say consider if your child's needs will add or subtract from your ability to be a supportive presence to your friend. That means bringing an activity for your child and bringing your own food and snacks, um, or everything that your child needs over there. It also means like having a conversation with your kid, perhaps on the way, saying, we're going to see a new baby, and maybe practice gentle touching if that's something that you need to practice with your child, and also setting the expectation that we may not be able to kiss or hold the baby because sometimes kids might be really really excited about a new baby, but we also want to be mindful of like germs. So that's another thing, is consider your friends. um, I wrote PPE preferences. And I'm not going to debate this. I'm not going to get into the territory. I'm here for sovereignty and autonomy when it comes to people's choices. What do I always mask when I go to a new baby's home? Yes. Um, do some people have, it's their choice. So I would just ask them, what would you like me to wear a mask? I ask that a lot to my clients. Um, if you obviously have any symptoms whatsoever, cancel. If you the first thing I do when I get there is wash my hands. Anytime, postpartum visit, anyone with a new baby, the first thing I do when I enter the home after I take off my shoes is go and wash my hands well up to my forearms. These are just good practices in general, but especially to babies who are very vulnerable, their immune systems are settling. And if you want to take it another step further, um, be up to date on your essential shots. Or if you plan to help your friend a lot, ask them that. When I was pregnant, the doctor suggested that of like, ask your family to have I think the Tdap um, so that just to enhance the chances. So you know your community best, but consider those things. Now, the thing about coming over, and when I think back to my postpartum, I have this one memory of a friend who's not quite my friend anymore. But I remember them coming over, and it just was kind of like about them being entertained with the baby. They wanted to hold the baby. They had no, I was the first of my friends to have a baby. So they were, it was almost like I was hosting their like playtime with the baby. And I've learned since then, wasn't really bothered at the time, but I also was much more of a people pleaser and caregiver at the time. So there was something sweet about seeing, their excitement to interact with my baby. And also, don't be that friend that needs to be hosted and entertained. Bring something with you, bring some food, bring some fruit at minimum if you can't bring a warm meal, or I'll have a list of like things you could bring, like shelf stable things for them. If you're not going to bring anything, and that's okay too, um, I would offer to take out the trash, to wash some dishes. If they have a dog, offer to walk the dog. Um, if you're sitting and chatting, then, do they have water? Can you, refill their water and make sure that's always stocked up? If you're just chopping it up, maybe you want to sit on the floor at their feet and rub their feet, or just have some gentle touch in general. It doesn't have to be like a full on massage. It could just be like squeezing their feet, getting a warm blanket if you notice that they are not covered or are wearing socks. Just noticing. This is part of, I think, some of these things are doula things, but again, my goal and what I think we need in this, collective culture is more people who are just informed about this. Like, we don't need to be the hired doula to share these things. And maybe your friend is somebody like I was when I became a new mom, who didn't think about the long-term healing, didn't know that a neglect of my physical healing now could mean mood struggles and reproductive villages and physical vitality loss in the long term. I honestly am still physically healing from the changes my body went through. So if you can, notice, if you learn and remember these things, take a screenshot, and you could just reference, like, how can I support each or one of these insights? Then you could be spreading ancestral knowledge, spreading care, and being the person that your friend will remember when they look back on their postpartum, and help them also ripple out to when they show up for others. I would always leave the place cleaner than you found it. Even that's just like, you notice dirty dishes around, bringing them, maybe washing them, loading the dishwasher, emptying the dishwasher. Um, Another thing, I wrote down some things that I've done, whether I was asked to, and now that I notice, is like, a lot of people will get gifts sent to them, or maybe they've ordered things themselves. We're in a online shopping world, so something that can also help is like just opening their packages, breaking down the boxes, and taking that out. You will not believe the number of, you will believe it, but the number of amount of packaging. I was just saying the other day to my friend, like, having a baby will make you hyper aware of your carbon footprint. And something that is part of decolonizing the culture of birth that I've had to navigate, that feels difficult sometimes, is even communicating to community that value, that you don't want to extremely like contribute to the friggin' landfills. Um, it feels awkward, actually, when I was a mom, and when I was pregnant, becoming a new mom, and I wanted, um, what am I trying to say? When I wanted secondhand things. Um, it felt a little awkward, and it even has felt awkward. There's some people, just depending on the friend, like that I've given secondhand gifts to, books to, and there's something about like wanting to know if that's something that they care about too, because some people do want all the new stuff. And so I try to like I try to gift from my values as well without like trying to force them on anybody. But giving secondhand, people um, don't do very often. And I remember the reason I say it was kind of like an awkward thing is because I remember saying that. And I remember my mother in law just like judging it for whatever reason, like, oh, just buy that new. You should just have it new. And there's certain things you're going to want new. I mean, there's certain things. If they're touching any private area, if like a Perry bottle, you're probably gonna want that new. Um, but just see the opportunities. And like I said, if you can do anything to help to pick up those things for someone. I went to Goodwill for a friend to see if they had what she needed. Um, and being willing, and also maybe like dropping off if they have returns, offering to take a drop off with you, to drop off at UPS to return. Those are the little things that add up into a new parent's brain, especially if they're not partnered. If they're not partnered, then they really need double the attention. Um, so I would say that, and let's see. Things to avoid. Any conversation about how baby is sleeping. Conversation about how tired they are. They're tired. They're not sleeping that much in comparison to before, that's for sure. So let's just not go there unless they bring it up. If they want to talk about it, obviously be a good listener. But I think I just want to steer away from the phrase that stands out to me when I was in my doula training was listening without a fixer's agenda. And honey, am I a fixer? Was raised to be a fixer, raised to be a caregiver. I'm a Cancer sun and Mercury, and I was raised to be a caretaker. And so listening without thinking of some kind of solution or way it can help is something I really had to learn and practice, and I probably still do. Um, just listen to them, and if it sounds like there's something they're needing, you can say, "Is there anything I can do to support with that?" Or could I do this for you to help? Or would you like suggestions? Ask those things first because new parents are getting suggestions all the time. You want to talk about lack of postpartum rest and care leading to mood disorders? Boy, was I snippy, short, irritable, especially when I would get suggestions from people because I wasn't receiving a lot of support. And the last thing I want when I'm already doing a lot of things on my own and my brain is already loading up with more and more thoughts. And if you are the type of person that runs through every possibility, that's researching things for every decision, then someone giving you a suggestion unsolicited is freaking annoying. So just don't do it. Um, Also, ask before posting photos. That is a good practice in general. Everybody with children, you should always ask before you post a photo of somebody else's child and or of course them and their vulnerable postpartum state. The first thing they're going to be thinking about when you show up, and this is not something you should do, but something I become mindful of too, is like you don't need to come over looking your obviously don't like change who you are, but I've noticed that coming over with like makeup full like I'm going out somewhere, um these people are struggling to get in the shower. They are usually thinking about how crusty they look, how tired they look. And so, just meet them where they're at. I'm not trying to say, like, come over looking busted yourself, although if that's you, be you. Um, but there is a mindfulness that I notice in people who, like, one of the first things they say, and maybe this is like the type of clients that I have that are very like goddess type A's, that are like, oh my God, you look so cute, and I just am a mess, and da da da. And so we don't want to do anything to like feed that. So I don't know, that's not a particularly like eloquent point, but just something I've noticed. Um, Asking before posting photos. And let's talk about food and drinks. So again, the main thing we want is a things that are nourishing, things that are warm, things that are easy to grab. And so um, soups. I will do the extra mile when I'm making soup for someone postpartum to even like debone it so that they don't need to pick through the bones. Pull out Filipinos, pull out those big chunks of ginger. Pull out those leaves that aren't edible, bay leaves, whatever they are. Pull out those big stems, anything that they cannot, that will require them to put their fingers into it. Take that extra step for your loved one. Um, Herbal infusions. If I don't typically I might make some at home and strain it, put it in a jar and bring it, or I might bring the herbs there and make the tea for them. If there's not I will say even herbs, depending on the parent, unless they're familiar and you know that, even that sometimes can feel like another chore that they won't do for themselves. So either ask if you can make the tea. I have a friend I visited postpartum a few weeks ago, and I brought her some jujubes, some Chinese red dates, and I asked if I could make the tea while I was there, told her about what it was, and then showed her partner how to make it, with the rest that I left there. So again, don't give them more work. When in doubt, especially for Asian folks, a bag of red dates and goji berries is my favorite to bring because it's simple. Tell them it's blood building and it's really easy to make. They just simmer it for some time and then add the goji berries. So I'll include some links to that at the end. And actually, let me give a quick shout out to this book that is my absolute fave. Might even say my postpartum Bible. Let me remove this media and add. The First 40 Days, The Essential Art of Nourishing the New Mother by Hang Oh Ow. Um, This book is if you want a good gift earlier in the pregnancy or midway through the pregnancy, like second trimester, early third trimester, gift this book. Shout out to my girl Emerald who gifted it to me in my pregnancy because it also is a book that I've worked with every postpartum client. I had another client who this was always on her counter. That when I came over, she had like little tabs for which recipes she wanted from it because majority of the book is sharing about the principles. That's where, as you could see on here, that's the credit. These 5 insights came from here, and they have a lot of stories of different cultures. And then it has like a whole cookbook section where there's recipes, where there's herbal infusions. So that's really, really lovely um, to give people so they can read as well because it's speaking to the new parent. The language is gendered, though. I will say that. Um, so other things, bone broth. if you're not gonna bring something that is warm, ready for them to eat, and, again, like I said, some of the things I've picked up Chinese takeout, but I got, like, a rice plate that had, like, warm vegetables. I didn't pick, like, the fried stuff as much, um, and just bringing that was, like, a quick thing I could grab on the way over to them, and these new parents, those are their 3rd child, so they're very busy. They were, like, just so appreciative to just have a warm meal. They didn't even have to touch the plates, the microwave, the stove, and it was just there when I showed up, and that was nice and simple. Obviously, ask if there's any allergies or sensitivities. Also, try to avoid things that are maybe super gassy, because gas for mother can transfer to the baby. Pantry staples that are great gifts are jars of organic coconut oil or ghee. Costco has like a big jar for a good price. You can give them more rice. I mean, we're in a recession right now, so just as don't go over the top if it's going to cause financial hardship to you. Maybe then also think about if there are the little things that you can give. Maybe you're buying in bulk, and this is something that I do a lot now. Is I'll buy in bulk what I can and just keep containers and bags so that I can give them part of what I have. And it's not all for them. This is village building. It's like you made your own dinner last night. Okay, then maybe pack half of it and take it to your friend, if you can drop it off that same night or the next day, and just let them know that. Um, Honey is a good one. Shelf stable milk, like nut milks, oat milks that are shelf stable, are great to have because they can also steep herbs in there. Um, Red dates and which are jujubes, dried mushrooms, shelf-stable snacks, especially little package ones, are in a jar that they can put by their breastfeeding station. When you visit them, see if they have a breastfeeding station. They might have like a rocker or a place where they sit, and notice if they have like a little basket. Shout out to my friend Jill, who's a nurse, and told me this with my first baby. I only had one baby, my first baby, with my son. She was like, that breastfeeding station was everything. It was like a little basket that had, um, some snacks, and then, like, having a jar with some little snacks so that in the night when you're sitting there feeding, you can be just, like, snacking on some nuts, some whatever it is, um, fruit leathers, anything that might be good. Lactation cookies, those are great, those are easy, um, to make, and maybe I'll throw in my favorite lactation cookie recipe too. Um, hmm, after the 40 days. After the 40 days, you can actually, let's go to the NICU. So, thanks for the NICU. Which is neonatal ICU. For those who don't know, that is the unit where babies go if they need care. Preemies will be there until they hit a certain benchmark, um, and parents can be there for months. If you have a friend who ends up in the NICU, um, a couple suggestions I would have are: one, asking if you can visit the baby. Maybe it was exhausting to go back and forth, and the times where I stayed home, there's some parents who are there 24/7 and barely ever leave. Again, I was a new mom, I was a little traumatized. After the first couple days, and thankfully we weren't there that long, but there were days where also, I was feeling a really big, like, deep sadness and grief. So I felt kind of frozen. I remember like day 3, I'm 3 days postpartum, or maybe a couple days more because that was like 3 days being out of the hospital for me. Um, I remember going home, going to bed, and struggling with this decision of, do I stay and rest because I'm so tired and I'm so sad and I'm so frozen? And allowing myself to do that, I wasn't completely resting because then I was feeling so guilty that I wasn't at my baby's side. And what if the doctor comes with an update and I'm not there? Oh, these nurses are feeding my baby and I'm not. And what if they're like, they were giving him formula because I wasn't making a lot of milk quite yet. And so I think having a friend who would be at the hospital, um, if I wasn't there, would have also been really nice. And I did have a friend who came and sat with me in the NICU and visited with baby and I in the NICU, and that was really, really nice too. So if you're somebody who, has a time like that and just wants to like sit in the room with baby so that you're there to just be a comforting presence, like on a spiritual side for baby, or, be so there's somebody visible there with the nurses or to hold them. That might be nice. And the other thing I was thinking was that um having a friend who I could give the keys to my place to while I'm at the hospital would also have been really special and supportive. So if you have that type of relationship, maybe they have a spare set of keys and while they're in the hospital, you can come over on your own time, even just 30 minutes when you're off work to like tidy up, maybe change their sheets, um, help with the pets. That's a big one, actually, if they're in the NICU, is helping tend to their pets, making some food or at least putting food in the fridge to do anything. So when they come home, they're not thinking about one more thing. If they're returning to work at 6 weeks, you or before 6 weeks, again, thinking about what time you have. There's there's this phrase that circulates. I don't know the source, but it's not that unique, I guess. But they say like, if you want a village, you have to be a villager, and or the other phrase I've heard a lot is like, the price of community is inconvenience. So just encouraging you to think about that. And when people think about wanting children one day and it's in the distant future, what I'll say is how you can start now is by showing up as the village member that you would want. And not in a way that's like, do this so other people owe you one, but show up so that you're modeling the type of care that you would like to receive and trust that someone will reciprocate, even if it's not that same person. Um, think about the world you want to live in and could you show up in that way? Now, at the same time, and this might be a little controversial, you're allowed to have needs yourself, and nothing should come at the expense of not tending to your own needs. That is saviorism, which is not what we want intertwined with this ecosystem. And so, as a doula who shows up for friends, it is my responsibility to tend to my own needs and to name what I need in order to show up. And sometimes they're looking for somebody trusted, and you're allowed to have transactions with money. Um, that's the part I think might be controversial is that maybe you have a friend that's going back to work early, and maybe you have experience with an infant and you have a little bit of availability and you just share like, hey, I'm available for this. I would at a lower rate, and maybe you have that honest conversation. This is also decolonizing. It's telling our friends what we need as well. um, I mention a lot how I have attended births for many friends, and I don't do it for free. Unless, I feel really called to. There's been instances, but it's gotten, I've had to move through discomfort to get comfortable with that, but in this last case, I told my friend, "Look, this is the amount that I need in order to show up for you fully, because the times where I really fucked up was where I showed up, committed to showing up, and then baby arrived, and because I didn't ask for what I needed or wasn't completely upfront about the fact that, I didn't have my needs met, then I find myself stressed out in the postpartum and even worse, not showing up for them to the extent that I imagine or that I had thought I would or even committed to because I need to find more work. And if I could go back in time, what I would have done was share that with the friend so that they knew, and perhaps they would have I had a client tell me that before, like, I would pay for that, like, I don't expect free labor, like, me not being available because I don't have more to give, they're like, "Well, let me pay you so you can." Um, so that's my statement on that. And one thing we can all do to be another way we can invest in our ability to show up confidently, because I know you might be like, well, I'm not going to do all of that. Obviously, if you have a full time job, I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to people who maybe are between jobs. And again, I'm speaking to this economy that we're in and to the future that we're stepping into. Finding jobs is hard. This is why I believe that training as a doula, developing the awareness of how to show up for one another, can be a way to provide for yourself too. I'm in California and I recently connected with a really cool group called Orca, ORKA, who pairs doulas and parents according to their benefits, their insurance benefits, because more insurance companies are covering the costs of doulas, especially if you have Medi-Cal. And so I'm kind of thinking right now, I've been thinking a lot lately about how for caregivers, for artists, for people who, for full time parents who might have school age kids that aren't always with you. Um, you might consider training as a doula, getting certified with Medi-Cal so that you can get paid by the state while showing up for your friends. Medi-Cal, they cover like 9 postpartum visits. And I think that's really, really cool to think about an ecosystem where I'm able to show up and get paid. Nothing has to come out of my friend's pocket. And we're working with some of these resources that are available. And one thing I'll say with that that we could all do is take an infant CPR class. And so those you can look them up. I think like the Red Cross usually are the ones that they're kind of everywhere. I don't know exactly what programs have free ones. But you might be able to find one covered. But they're, under $100 for sure, maybe closer to 50, to learn how to confidently care for an infant. In general, I think a CPR training, if you've never taken one, is really great, and knowing how to use things like AEDs, and how to respond to an emergency in a first response in those scenarios. So, bringing it back to things you can do, the last things on my list, uh, after the 40 days, go on a walk with your friends. Continue to bring them food. Continue to be a listener. Um, be specific with your ask again. Give them options versus open-ended question. What do you want to do can be overwhelming for somebody who's got a lot going on. So this or that is my suggestion. Things you can do that cost nothing. Lean into your strengths. Could you commit to a regular visit or take on a regular task for a set period of time? Could you commit to dropping off a hot meal weekly? Could you come over to cook once a month and put food in their freezer? Could you, maybe you can't come over, but you are the kind of person that can have them on emergency bypass so that their call or text comes through any time of day, in case they really need that person to talk to. Um, are you an energy worker? And could you sit down to send Reiki or prayers regularly? This is one that so many of us, it is not a small thing. It's not a big thing, and it's also meaningful. I know we can doubt the, like, power of just, like, thinking with good energy of our friends, sending them heart beams, sending them prayers, but I do this a lot while I'm on the couch. If I'm watching TV, I might just, like, tap in, depending on your relationship. Maybe your friend gives you blanket consent to, like, just send Reiki whenever you want, and you don't need to necessarily be trained. When I say Reiki, you're sending them energy work. So, like, literally imagine you are connecting to them, and I will actually, the last episode of this month, um, come back for that, and I will go deeper into, I'm talking about spiritual hygiene for doulas, and I'm gonna include some little energy work practice of how anybody can send energy work safely, um, and effectively. So maybe they want you to text before. If you're a practice energy worker, I'll just speak to you right now. You might want to do that for your friend. And when I do it, I know sometimes we do that with like a whole reading of like, this is what I saw, this is what I moved. Um, Depending on your relationship, if it's your good friend, you don't need to share everything that you do. You might share a message that came through, or if there was something that strongly was felt. Like the other day, I told my friend, like, I heard do this, and it was like a hairbrushing practice. Um, but maybe you just want to share and affirm the love of the spirits, um, that surround them. And you don't need to do a full on thing, but again, just like, we are connected. I think that's what that 40-day number is like standing out to me today as like, we are so connected. We have the power through our presence, through our intention, through our breath to connect with one another and co-regulate. And so even if you're just, your friend's going through a hard time in their postpartum, taking 5 minutes to intentionally breathe while imagining holding them in your heart, or imagining the two of you connected, and imagining, you know, nourishing energy from the earth getting sent to them. That is not nothing. Now, if you got money to spend, you might want to consider getting them, helping hire maybe someone of their culture to do a ritual with them, an in-home massage. You might consider a postpartum doula, which can obviously be beyond the means of one person's gift. So maybe it's coordinating and pooling money amongst community for them to get some help in the home. I'll share in the description a couple links for food deliveries that I like. There's this one called Cookma that a client introduced me to. And what's really cool is that they're like one pot dishes, but they put the dry ingredients into a little container. And so it's like the lentils with the seasoning, with everything you need. So you put it in the pot with water, simmer it. And those are, I think, from Ayurvedic um, traditions, which are also focused on the warming. And then just straight up cash if you have it or can pool money. They're going to need it. They're going to need anything, so that they can find what they need accessibly. Cash, I like because that opens up secondhand routes for buying things, or gift cards. I don't like Visa gift cards. Can we just like have a moment to acknowledge how inconvenient those can be? So that's why I say cash. I feel like people want to do the gift cards because it like looks nicer. It's more like gifty feeling. Nobody wants to deal with that. Zelle them, Venmo them, whatever it is. Don't add an extra step. So I think I've officially covered everything that I had on my notes. And if you still have questions, if I left anything out, if you have something to add, throw it in the comments, throw it in the Spirit Doula hotline, and I will address it on the next show. Next week, we are going to be talking about the birth realm method. And that is my method that I developed. And it's a spiritual approach to birthing that blends Reiki, hypnosis, and mediumship that I've been practicing for almost 5 years. I'm going to share about that, a little bit of the evidence for it, because it's really it's kind of a mystical way of going in and creating room for that crowning moment, what the show is named after, the crowning moment, which is the most difficult and challenging part for every person when they're giving birth, is when that baby's right about to be born and they look at me and they're like, I can't do it. I can't go on. And that's a moment where we're initiated. I saw a post today of someone say that 8 centimeters, which 10 centimeters is what they consider complete dilation. That 8 centimeters is the moment where your ancestors enter. That's the moment where you're going into the other dimension and retrieving your baby. That's the moment that we prepare for in the birth realm. So I'm going to share about that. I'm going to share about a reading that I had recently of a practitioner who went into the birth realm and told me what she saw. And I'm also going to share how to finally get into the most structured and supported version of this work, which is finally launching after a very, very long time. Um, it's going to have a Telegram group chat, and it's not going to be a group program. It's going to be one-on-one work with the ability for my clients to connect on their own, so that if you're postpartum, if you're preparing to conceive, you have a community of peers who share our values. And to my knowledge, it will be the only queer spiritual parenting space that exists of this type on the internet that hits all those things: queer, radical, abolitionist, and mystical. Because I've talked about that in past episodes. I feel like as queer spiritualists, we always are forced to choose in the birth world, at least, between the politically minded and the spiritually minded. And so that's what we're here to mesh. Um, and also next Monday, so that will be next Thursday's episode. Check out my calendar on my website. I now have themed out everything for all of the topics instead of being open-ended. I completely failed at being closer to 30 to 45 minutes today, but it's because we were pretty comprehensive, and I think you're ready now to show up for your friends. Do you feel ready? Tell me in the chat, tell me in the comments. Do you feel ready now to show up and love on your postpartum friends? If not, let me know your questions. And next week, I've also got Soul Spa on Monday the 8th. That is my free monthly group energy work. And on the 18th, if you're a doula or a care practitioner, I host the Care Creator Circle at Church of Soft Power, which is our church for artists. And that is our peer mentorship space. So if you're a doula that's been wanting a mentor, reach out to me. It's typically only open to members of the church or past clients, but introduce yourself, and I would love to invite you into to see if that's a good fit. You can always go deeper with me by booking a one-on-one consultation, booking a spirit baby reading. And right now, I highly suggest getting on my newsletter because my seasonal services will be live by the summer solstice. And I have a whole new lineup, including virtual ceremonies that I'm calling Closure, for those of us who need closure on past reproductive events, whether those are abortion, miscarriage, childbirth, or events that happen in your life that you feel like are blocking you from your journey to become a mother and pursue childbirth. That's it for me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for wanting to love on your community that's giving birth and wanting to learn more. It's what we truly need in the world, and I am glad if anybody watches this. So take care, and we'll see you next Thursday.